It's been called a lot of things. The greatest play in Super Bowl history. The worst play call in Super Bowl history. But underneath all that, it may have completely changed the legacy of one of the league's best quarterbacks. Unlike the NBA or MLB, the NFL relies on trophies to distinguish its best players from one another, especially at quarterback. And with Wilson missing out on what appeared to be a second Lombardi trophy, did Wilson do critical damage to an otherwise stellar career? Or was it his recent difficulties on and off the field that have damaged his football reputation? So, without using any Subway memes, okay, actually, let's look at one real quick.
Signature sandwich. It's called the Danger Witch, and it's dangerously good.
Let's take a look at Russ Wilson's career to see where it all went downhill and if he can get back to being elite. Wilson was taken by the Seahawks in the third round of the NFL. He had been a proven winner in college and an excellent athlete, also having been drafted in baseball. Standing at only 5'11", perhaps scouts were wary of his size, despite him meeting the Bill Parcells requirements for drafting a QB. A senior who graduated from college, started for at least 3 years, and also won 23 games. Being taken in the third round was definitely a blessing in disguise for Wilson, but we'll get to that later. Prior to the 2012 season, the Seahawks signed Matt Flynn to be their presumptive starter at 3 years, $19.5 million. But Wilson impressed in camp so much that Pete Carroll handed the keys over to Wilson and never looked back. Wilson tied the rookie record of 26 touchdown passes in a season while rushing for almost 500 yards. As mentioned, being drafted in the third round was fortuitous for Wilson, who had the luxury of being placed onto a team with a few pieces already in place, like Marshawn Lynch, a decent receiving core, Bobby Wagner, and, of course, the introduction of the Legion of Boom. In the year prior to Wilson's arrival, the Seahawks finished 7th in points against on defense, and in Wilson's rookie year, they finished 1st, allowing just 15.3 points a game. In fact, from 2012 to 2015, the Seahawks led the league in points allowed, and they wouldn't fall outside the top 10 in this category until Wilson's 6th year in the league in 2017. But make no mistake, Wilson did his part for the offense. From his rookie year all the way through 2020, he never once missed a start due to injury while compiling a record of 103, 51-1 during his time in Seattle. In just his second year, he led the Seahawks to a Super Bowl title while throwing 26 touchdowns and just 9 interceptions. Sure, he didn't have to do much in the Super Bowl, but he finished the year 6th in the AP Offensive Player of the Year voting. And this is probably the worst you can say about Wilson during his time with the Seahawks. He was playing during the peak of quarterback play, the likes of which we will probably never see again. Brady, Breeze, Manning, Rodgers. It's hard to win a lot of awards when that's the competition you're dealing with. What Russell Wilson will certainly be remembered for in his Seattle days is that he was a true playmaker and one of the first signal callers to usher in the dual threat era. Wilson was clutch. In 2020, Wilson had his best season, throwing 40 touchdowns and over 4,200 yards while also leading his team to a 12-4 record. He played poorly in a wild-card loss to the Rams, and despite having a touchdown-interception ratio of 25-6 in 2021, he won just 6 games as the starter. Unfortunately for the Seahawks, they were on the hook for another 2 years of a massive Wilson contract and decided to cut their losses and trade him to Denver. In hindsight, this deal turned out to be one of the worst in NFL history for the Broncos, who not only shipped 5 draft picks to Seattle, but decided to extend Wilson to the tune of 5 years, $245 million. And this is where things get interesting in the discussion of Wilson. Wilson had always seemed to be a bit of an outsider in the Seahawks locker room, but when he got to Denver, he apparently became an actual outsider. He reportedly had his own office on the second floor of the facility, which allegedly created what was called an unusual team dynamic. This was just one of the many problems for Wilson in Denver, including an offensive coordinator in Nathaniel Hackett, who would be demoted by the Jets after early season struggles this year. Wilson was 4-11 in his 15 starts for the Broncos in 2022, and the offense sputtered to just 16.9 points per game, 32nd in the league. Wilson was also sacked a preposterous 55 times, also last in the NFL. So, was this an anomaly, or were we starting to see the end of one of the game's most consistent quarterbacks? 2023 was better, but still not great for Wilson and the Broncos, who had hired a new offensive coordinator in Joe Lombardi. They finished the year 8-9, and while the offense was slightly better, the defense was much worse, and Denver decided to make another decision that no doubt will continue to hurt the franchise for years to come. The Broncos were so certain they were done with Wilson that they released him, thereby eating the remaining $85 million on his contract. At this point, Wilson's career as a starting QB in the league was in jeopardy. The Steelers would come to his rescue, signing him to the veteran league minimum of 1 year, $1.21 million, just a few years after Wilson had signed two of the largest contracts in league history. Then, just a few days later, Wilson's status as QB1 seemed to already be unclear as Pittsburgh traded for Justin Fields. Fields was named the starter on Week 1 due to a Wilson injury and proceeded to lead the Steelers to a 4-2 record as a starter on a team that was not really expected to compete for the AFC North behind the Ravens and Bengals. Despite Fields' strong play, with Wilson back healthy, Mike Tomlin decided to make a change at QB and promote Wilson, prompting nearly everyone to question the move. So far, the decision has paid off, with Wilson going 2-0 and looking a bit like his old self in comfortable wins over the Jets and Giants, prompting Mike Tomlin to tell reporters, "That's why I'm highly compensated." For now, the Steelers sit atop the AFC North with a record of 6-2, but not only do they still have to play both the Ravens and Bengals twice, they also have a date with the undefeated Chiefs on Christmas Day. With a solid defense and a possibly revitalized Wilson under center, the Steelers could make a run at the playoffs, but will any of this bring Wilson's legacy back from the brink? If Wilson were a higher draft pick, perhaps he would have a greater level of admiration than he does. He's thrown for over 40,000 yards, 19th all-time in that category. He's one of only 4 QBs to rush for over 5,000 yards. He's currently tied for 4th all-time in passer rating, a mark that shows his incredible consistency. He's thrown more than 300 touchdowns, a mark hit by only 14 QBs in league history. Wilson's career has been stellar, and as mentioned earlier, the only mark against it is that he played at a time when arguably 4 of the best QBs to ever put on a uniform were competing for accolades. Would his second Super Bowl have put him over the top? Maybe. But it looks like Wilson still has some time left, and if he can bring back some of his magical playmaking, he might have one more run left in him after all.